hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestel.
And this is the show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 186, and we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Paul, my friend, you were not raptured during the eclipse.
Ha! Thanks to Snoopy.
Yeah. Well, no, Snoopy. I don't know what was going on. You with Snoopy being a part of the NASA coverage, but it was very strange.
Why not Snoopy?
I mean, Snoopy's wonderful. I just sometimes wonder what generation it was they were pitching that broadcast at.
Surely Snoopy transcends such barriers as age. He's timeless, isn't he?
I love that. He's like the lawnmower man. He is forever. How you doing, man?
I'm feeling young and fresh this week. I went to a gig last night.
Oh, what'd you see?
I went to see the Stereo MCs, the Inspiral Carpets, and the Happy Mondays. And it was brilliant to be at a gig where I was nowhere near the oldest person there, including the acts on stage. Yes, I was so rock and roll. I had 2 Cokes and a water. Look
at you.
I know. I'm a disgrace.
A changed man.
I'm so sad what's become of me.
It is a broken man who stands before me.
Ha! I went to a Wizards restaurant on Sunday.
Oh, this is that Harry Potter themed place you took your mother to.
Yeah, as a surprise for her birthday.
Did you like it?
She loved it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, because I booked her in because we had food and a 45-minute indoor owl display.
Very cool. 4
different owls were flying around the room.
That is a lot of trust you're placing in that restaurant.
But, yeah, my mum loved it. It was brilliant. We had one even land on his table just randomly, this beautiful little tawny owl. It was fab.
Very cool. Well, I'm glad it was good and not a staircase situation. I almost got to witness a terrible, but maybe a little bit funny accident. Thankfully, it didn't happen. But I was at the gym this morning, and I was running on the treadmill, and there was this guy on one of the machines in front of me. And he was wearing, I kid you not, he was fully dressed in street clothes. He had designer jeans on, a very, what looked like an expensive leather bomber jacket, and a very, high-end t-shirt. And he just took the leather bomber jacket off, laid it over the treadmill, and started kind of jogging in place. Now, the thing is, I got no beef with that. Like the other day, I was bored. I was driving past the gym. I thought, fuck it. I'm fully dressed, but I've got an undershirt on. I'll go bang out a biceps workout just for something to do. So I was the creepy old guy in there, my Italian undershirt in the gym, and khakis, lifting weights like a weirdo. So hey, no judgment for what you're going to wear. Fine, do what you're going to do. But he clearly did not think this situation through, because the vibrations from him running on the treadmill knocked his very expensive bomber jacket off onto the moving part, which pushed it into his legs, which, if he did not have the reflexes he did, would have sent him right into the arms of Jesus.
Sounds like he was on cocaine to me.
Well, it's not impossible. I mean, it was 11 in the morning, but that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, he's just trying to wind down.
Well, again, he almost wound down permanently. It was quite the sight. Again, he can move. I'll give him that. He's got the reflexes. He doesn't need to do anything else aside from maybe dial back the nose candy. Yeah.
I would not recommend denim for gym wear, though.
No, I mean, it's not the first time I've seen that, so that was, it was weird, but again, I've been working out long enough, you see almost every variation of strangeness, but I'd never seen someone almost murdered by their own jacket before. So anyways, this has nothing to do with the topic of today's show, which is a return to one of my favorite topics, and that is haunted hotels.
Ooh.
Yes, sir, and this is actually fortuitous timing, because you just had an interview on Mysteries and Monsters with an author of a book about, was it Virginia's haunted hotels?
Yeah, Susan Schwartz. Lovely lady.
Yeah, it was a really good show. I just finished listening to it last night.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that state, which I'm not surprised about.
No, I know we've had someone ask us about doing a Virginia episode of this show, which is definitely something that's on the docket. But on this episode, we're going to be telling, I believe we have 5 stories of varying lengths. Some of them are quite long, of hauntings in hotels. But what's really cool about that is some of them are from quite far away. We have one from Hong Kong, and I believe we have another from, it's escaping me. I want to say it's mainland China, or no, I think it might be Korea. I think it might be, but anyways, and we haven't had many stories from those parts of the world in this show, so I'm really, really excited for it. In fact, actually, I found a new resource while researching this show, which could allow us to do some episodes specifically focused on places like Malaysia, China, so that could be something coming down the pike in future.
Fabulous.
Yes, sir. But there are 2 things I want to get to. Of course, we have our patron shoutouts, but before we even get there, there's a little piece of listener feedback we got on Instagram that I wanted to share here because it posits what I think is a really interesting paranormal theory. So this comes from Liam, and Liam says, "Good morning. I'm a recent listener to the podcast and am catching up on all the past episodes. I have a theory about the man in the chair from the Ghosts in the Military episode. Cold iron. If jinn are a sort of fae, then cold iron is supposed to be able to injure or bind them. Shrapnel, while often steel wire, can quite easily be cast iron as well, especially in an IED, which are often constructed from locally sourced and cheap materials. So, in theory, a large chunk of cold cast iron flying at explosive speed could very easily sever a fae foot. P.S. I was an explosives and ammunition technician in the U.S. Marines."
Well, I think you've solved it there.
Yeah, I think you have, Liam. I got a chill reading that, actually.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, it wouldn't surprise you. Have to, with the greatest respect, when you're dealing with trench warfare and IEDs, then usually they'll just grab whatever's to hand, and they will probably repurpose shrapnel from other items or vehicles or things from people's homes or whatever, and chuck whatever they can in that will cause us maximum damage. So why wouldn't there be some iron in that?
Yeah, so I know that was a listener story, the man in the chair. So again, listener, if you're out there, if you're still listening to the show, there's a possible solution for you. Well, I don't know if it's a solution exactly because it begs a lot more questions, but I think it goes a long way towards explaining what it is that happened on that episode.
Yes, I've got something I wanted to share with you before we dived into it as well.
Oh, shoot.
So, I discovered that book about haunted airfields here in the UK randomly the other day.
Yeah.
Well, there's a fact I want to share with you,
Ooh.
which made me read it 3 times because I couldn't get my head around the figure that was being quoted. It blew my mind. Right?
Okay.
So, during the Second World War, between the 3rd of September 1939 and the 14th of August 1945, 70,253 people were killed. That's just in the Air Force.
Wow.
47,000 of them died whilst on operations.
What about the remainder?
Accidents. So, a lot of places people would think bomber hangars would just blow up and people had crash planes just flying around the country.
Oh, interesting.
That's incredible, isn't it? 70,000 people.
It's hard to get your head around, like, the scope of it. I mean, I like to always put things in terms of Revelstokes, and like Revelstoke's about 8,000 people, so almost 10 times the population of my hometown.
Yeah. Obviously that includes British, Canadian, Australian and Polish, because that's who all made up the majority. That's not including American airmen either.
Wow. That's a staggering figure.
Yeah. And I just couldn't get my head around it. I just could not comprehend that amount of loss.
I mean, it's a fascinating statistic, but it also, when you think about it in terms of its human toll, that's a nightmare.
But yes, it's a very good book. There's 1 or 2 rather dubious stories. There's one of those, somebody's hair turns white overnight and all that nonsense. But there's some brilliant stories. Somebody who ended up feeling so sorry for the ghost that she'd got in her hut. She cried when they knocked the hut down because she knew she would never see him again.
Oh, wow. And, sorry, what's the name of the book again?
It's called Ghost Stations by the marvellously named Bruce Barrymore Halfpenny.
That is a great name.
You'll be unsurprised to know he's ex-military.
I was going to say, yeah. He both British and ex-military are almost unavoidable with that name.
Yes. I mean, it's quite interesting. He tells us that he used to work on high security at a secret military base in East Anglia, which I suspect is Rendlesham.
Oh ho!
But he never names it, but I'm not sure there's any other high-security military bases in East Anglia.
I suppose that's as circumspect as he could be without maybe getting into trouble. And he has. I often wonder, too, if you invoke Rendlesham, if that doesn't create a whole other series of complications.
Yes. Well, the book was printed in 1986, so the whole Rendlesham thing had only just popped to the surface, so he'd probably just ignored it and hoped it went away.
You fool.
But yes, I just thought I'd share that staggering statistic, which kind of makes you wonder why more airfields aren't haunted here.
Well, you wonder, are they not haunted, or are they just not haunted in a way that the people there have yet picked up on? On this episode, we will explore questions such as that, and also talk a little bit about the new Netflix series Files of the Unexplained. We're going to save the full breakdown of that for our patrons, but there's a couple things I want to talk to Paul about, having just seen a couple episodes, and all of that will be coming up. But before we do that, we got to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, we could not do what we do without you. And so thank you. Thank you, thank you. For real, guys. Every single person who downloads the Ghost Story Guys, you help make us who we are, but patrons are the ones who truly allow the show to continue, and for that, we are deeply, deeply grateful. Now, of course, we'd like to thank all our patrons, but we would especially like to thank our latest patrons. They are
Ian,
Jen,
Davbrad,
Jean Ross,
P.V.,
Sandra Uvegas Solano,
Grumpy Toad,
Veronica Pigeon,
Catherine Gale Taylor Howe.
Again, thank you so much for your generous support of this show. We could not do it without you. For real, we absolutely could not. And we want to give a big thank you to our Apple Podcast subscribers as well, and remind you that if you sign up to GSG Premium via Apple Podcasts, forward your confirmation to ghoststoryguys@gmail.com, and we will make sure to thank you, because we appreciate your support just as much. If you'd like to join our community, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or sign up to GSG Premium via Apple Podcasts. And while we'll wait until the end of the episode to tell you about all the cool stuff you get, we will say for $1 a month, you get an ad-free feed. Who doesn't want that? Ads suck. I really hate the goddamn ads. So again, if you want to avoid all that nonsense, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or sign up to GSG Premium via Apple Podcasts. All right, one last thing before we hit the stories. Shout out to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is a project of film journalist and composer Harper Smith. You can find more of Harper's work at rainydaysforghosts.bandcamp.com, or by searching for them and Street Witch on streaming platforms everywhere. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with stories of haunted hotels. Corner room. In our culture, we always believe that corner rooms must be avoided in any hotel due to the fact that it is the least populated or visited area by humans, since they don't walk towards the end of the hallway often. Thus, spirits can have that space to themselves without much disturbance. Back in 2017, me and my mother visited Korea and went to Jeju Island. We stayed in a pretty new hotel. It was spacious and big, and the price was rather cheap for a 4-star hotel. Much to our dismay, we were allocated a corner room. Thinking it was a new hotel, me and Mum brushed off any unpleasant feelings and checked into our room. It was pretty late at night, around 11 p.m. when we checked in. In Chinese belief, when checking into a hotel room, you always knock on the door and politely tell any spirits inside, if there are any, that we are merely staying for a few days and will not disturb them. Then you flush the toilet immediately upon entering and also place our shoes in a haphazard manner. We did all those things. However, upon entering the room, we felt really drained and uncomfortable. We received 2 key cards, one for electrical usage in the room, one for the door key. My mother put the card on the table and we started unpacking. Again, much to our dismay, After unpacking and wanting to go to the convenience store to buy some snacks, the keys had disappeared and were not on the table anymore. My mother immediately started blaming me for misplacing them, and we spent a good 20 or 30 minutes arguing while flipping the whole room upside down looking for the key. When we were about to give up, the key just reappeared at the same spot on the table. There is no way we would have missed that. It was right smack in the middle of the table. Also, we realized that the beverages in the fridge were all half drank. I'm not sure if the hotel staff didn't change it or if it was linked to anything supernatural. The feeling in the room was still particularly ominous, so we decided to check our asses out of the room. I called the receptionist hotline with a phone provided by them in the room, and all I heard was static sounds. In the end, we packed everything and went down to reception to request a room change. The next room we checked into didn't have any ominous or heavy feelings, especially compared to the previous room, and we had a good stay overall. So, Paul, this is actually really new to me. I was not aware that this was a belief in Chinese culture about the corner room.
Yeah, corner rooms and bathrooms. Interesting.
So is that why the flush?
Yeah.
So that's not all that dissimilar from belief in the jinn, because I know in the Middle East, I recall reading that, if you say Bismillah before you relieve yourself, it's sort of meant to be like a way to warn the jinns in those places that you're about to do what you do so you don't piss anyone off.
Yeah, you should always announce yourself. I work with one of my colleagues at work is from Hong Kong, so she's informed me of several of the paranormal customs of Hong Kong and China beyond.
Interesting. So I'm curious about the shoes. Do you know what the explanation behind that is, or what the belief behind that is?
No, I've never asked her about that, so I'm going to pick her brains the next time I see her.
Oh yeah, I'd be very curious to know what the outcome of that is, or what the rationale behind it is.
But I'm not surprised there's something strange going on Jeju Island.
Oh really? Why is that?
It's got a very checkered past.
Oh, how so?
There was a horrific incident of ethnic cleansing that occurred there after the Second World War.
Oh, okay.
And nobody knows who did it. Well, they know somebody did it, but they don't know who they were. They don't know which side they were on. It's one of those things that happened and nobody seems to have been speaking about until the last sort of 10 or 15 years. It's like a bit of a South Korean scandal.
Really?
Yeah.
That reminds me of Daksa off the coast of Croatia, off Dubrovnik. There's that island that's allegedly crazy haunted, but in actual fact, it seems like what happened was that's where the good guys rounded up all the alleged fascists. I mean, some real fascists and some who were just kind of swept up in the sort of the net and executed them without trial. Rather than deal with it, they just the island kind of became off limits.
Yeah, I studied it during my A-level history.
No kidding.
Because it led into because it was one of the key parts of everything that led during the Korean War. There was things like that going on. Because obviously the communists invaded the south and that's what started it. And Jeju, unfortunately, had a lot of repercussions based on that. But it's also known as the Hawaii of Korea. It's a beautiful, beautiful island. It's basically a volcanic atoll, I think. So it's incredible. But it's mysterious. And I think it's also one of those places that's got one of those magic roads.
Oh, where it seems like you're being dragged uphill.
Yes.
Oh, fascinating.
I'm sure it's got a magic road there. I'm not too sure. But I know about Jeju because of the horrific incident just after the end of the Second World War. It's like late 40s, I think. But so I'm not surprised there's ghosts wandering there. Plus, they've got a big tradition of water ghosts there. And I can't remember what they call them, but they're a big fishing economy. But they have a lot of water ghosts that are supposed to be like pale and obviously very, very strange looking, wandering about.
Interesting. Well, see, this is one of those things that has sort of delayed doing episodes more focused on that part of the world, just because, it's so easy for me, who doesn't necessarily have all that information in my background, to step on a landmine, so to speak. I want to make sure I've done the research. I understand culturally what's happening. Like we've had a script for a Singapore episode for 2 years, 3 years. I've had this script kind of sitting in the folder. But because you need to know more about how Singapore operates for some of the stories to make sense, I haven't done it just because I don't feel like I can speak on it in any kind of position of authority. And I think that's really important with when you're talking about this stuff, right? I mean, it's sometimes easy to get distracted telling the story and forget that, we're talking about, real lives and in this case, real history.
Especially South Korea has probably, over the last 10 years, become one of the most important cultural centres in the world, I would suggest, with the power of K-pop and horror cinema. They have pushed the boundaries in numerous entertainment fields and also sport, because South Korea are a pretty good football team, and I'm very fortunate that the greatest South Korean footballer ever plays for my team, Heung-min Son, the Korean superstar. So it's one of those places that is clearly a lot going on there, and yet most people outside of South Korea know next to nothing about it.
I mean, again, you can count me in on that. I mean, I'm passingly familiar with their cinema because I'm a movie nerd, but culturally beyond that, and K-pop, of course, I don't listen to it, but I'm familiar with the force it represents.
Yeah, I had you down as a big Blackpink fan.
I know that one of the members is named Jenny. That's all I know about Blackpink.
I think all you need to know about South Korea is that Train to Busan is probably the best horror film made this century so far.
I've still yet to watch that, but it is on my list. Actually, there is a brand new film out of South Korea that's kind of been a breakout hit recently. It's called Exuma, and it's been a massive hit in South Korea, and it's not going to do crazy numbers over here, but it's making some money. And I keep missing it. For some reason, it's not playing near me. It's playing in Kitchener and Waterloo, and every time I'm going to go see it, it's a night I can't either afford to go all the way over there, or I just don't have the time. But I really want to see it.
Yeah, Busan's. Oh. Talking about films that make you cry. Oh.
Now, what about the sequel, Peninsula?
That's good, but it's not Train to Busan.
But is it not going to make me cry? Because that's the thing. I don't want to cry. I cry enough.
Well, I didn't expect Train to Busan. I didn't expect Train to Busan to make. Horror films don't make me cry. Train to Busan, I had tears in my eyes.
Well, like I said, I do enough of that as it is.
And it's got one of the best set pieces in horror cinema, which involves a zombified baseball team.
Okay, so I'm a little more on board with zombie baseball team. That sounds like kind of like the Zombie Warriors.
For someone that loves horror films as much as you do, I cannot believe you've not seen it.
It's because I heard that it was really emotional. I struggle with that sometimes. If I know that there's a big emotional wallop coming at the end of something, I tend to I'll steer clear of it.
Yeah, I wish I'd heard that.
The only thing that really kind of pushed me towards seeing it is that I know that Ma Dong-seok is in it, and he's great. He has really become a massive star in action cinema in South Korea. If folks, if you guys haven't seen, I don't know that you would have, but if you like action movies, watch the Roundup movies with Ma Dong-seok, because he is a big motherfucker. And there is a scene in the very first film, the very opening scene, he slaps a man into unconsciousness, and it's brilliant. It's just great. And I think he's got a new film out on Netflix called Badlands Hunters or Badland Hunters or something like that. Anyways, yeah, South Korean films, lots of great shit. And I will say, I will not often defend Netflix because I think Netflix has been a net negative for movies and artistic culture generally. But I will say that they've done a lot to bring South Korean, Indian, Chinese films to Western audiences.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
And we are back from an edit where Paul and I talked about international cinema for about 10 minutes. If you're a patron, you'll get part of all of that in the bonus conversation, which is available only to our subscribers. Again, patreon.com/ghoststoryguys or GSG Premium via Apple Podcasts. And we're going to go on to the next story.
The Watcher. Let me preface this by saying I get sleep paralysis. I've had more instances of sleep paralysis than I can count, but I'll say an average of around 4 times a year for the past 30 years. Some years it's more often, some years it's less, but by the time this experience occurred, I was well versed enough to be able to identify when it's happening and to be able to pull myself out of it, because I have a method. Generally, when I get an attack of SP, I can hear everything around me, but I can't move or make a noise. I've never seen the old hag, and only once have I seen the man in the wide-brimmed hat. And he had red eyes when I saw him. And yes, he was pushing me down on my chest. Not cool, not fun. I never want that to happen again. But I also knew he wasn't real as it was happening. So 1% of the time, I've had a visual hallucination. Normally, it's just that I can't move or speak, but can still hear everything around me, and somehow see the room even though my eyes are shut. But this, it doesn't fit the mould of sleep paralysis, at least not in the way that I've ever experienced it. That's why it bothered me so much then, and it still bothers me now. My son was young at the time, maybe 5 or 6. My then husband and I drove to visit my grandmother for Christmas. She lived about 100 miles away from me, and she had 2 extra bedrooms, but the other family members scooped up into the extra rooms before we could get there, so my husband and I rented a hotel room a few miles from her house. It was something like a Best Western or a Holiday Inn. If I had to guess, I would say at the time it was probably less than 10 years old. We checked into our hotel room quickly, dropped our stuff off, and went straight to my grandmother's house. It was a long drive down to her house, about 2 hours, and then an eventful evening, so we were beat. We left Grandma's probably around 9 p.m. and headed back to the hotel room. We drove around for an extra 20 minutes trying to get our cranky son to sleep, which made me even more exhausted. The exhaustion is the thing that had me thinking that maybe this was sleep paralysis, because that usually triggers it for me. But again, what happened next was like nothing I'd experienced before or since. The layout of the room was that the hotel room door opened up into a little hallway, and directly to the left is the bathroom with a tiny closet next to it. Moving just past the hallway, the wall on the left turned 90 degrees, and the beds were to the left. To the right, you could follow the wall straight to the corner. There was a dresser along that wall, and in the corner was an armchair. From that corner, follow the wall, and there was maybe a window facing the parking lot, and then in the next corner there was another armchair, maybe around 3 feet from the head of one of the queen beds. That was where my husband and I slept. My husband slept on the side near the armchair, and I slept on the inside, so I could be closer to our son in the other bed. So we were exhausted. My son had fallen asleep in the car. I tucked him in and very quickly got changed and got into bed. My husband followed shortly after, and I shut the lights off. Before I fell asleep, I observed that the light from the parking lot peeked in over the top of the window curtain. It was brighter than I would have imagined with the curtain drawn, but I was too exhausted for it to bother me, and I passed out quickly. Sometime in the middle of the night, I heard the click of a door handle turning, the lever kind. I was alarmed, but my body was still heavy with sleep. I was also facing the direction of the door. I watched as the orange light from the hotel hallway slides across the wall opposite me, and then slowly disappears as the door closes again quietly. I felt like I was passing in and out of sleep, so the sight of this almost had a strobing effect. A young man wearing medium blue baggy jeans and no shirt walks past the end of our beds. At this point I'm more alert, but I'm laying in bed trying to figure out if this is real or not, because it's so vivid, but I've also a feeling that I was passing in and out of consciousness still. From the moment I heard the click of the door handle, I was scared out of my mind, but still so tired. I wanted to get up. I wanted to scream, but I can't tell what is holding me in bed. Is it fear, or is it just exhaustion? At this point, the man is behind me. I can feel him looking at me, but I'm absolutely terrified to turn over. If I turn over, is it going to spook him and it'll attack my family? Right now I can tell he's not moving, just looking. I finally feel alert enough and I realise that my eyes are closed. What? But I can feel him in the room. It was the scariest thing I've ever done because I might be facing an attacker in my hotel room, but I force my eyes open and turn over. Nothing. There's no one in the room. My heart is racing. Jesus, that was so real. I look at my husband and he's fast asleep with his back turned on me, snoring gently. My son is asleep. Everything was how it was when I fell asleep. I'm still on my back, looking at the armchair in the corner at the end of the beds with the soft white light of the parking lot falling onto the chair as I calm down enough to fall back asleep. I can't tell you how much time passed, but it was dark, and then all of a sudden I can see the armchair in the corner at the foot of the bed again. But this time, the man that entered the room earlier is now sitting in it. With the light shining from the window, I can see him a little better. It's a soft light, but I can tell that his hair is buzz-short, and it's dark brown. He looks young, maybe 18 to 25. He's either white with a tan or maybe Hispanic. I can't see his face features too well, but he could be a model. He has strong cheekbones, a sort of perfect straight nose, and a strong jaw. It's too dark to see the details, just his silhouette. He's sitting there calmly, just staring at me. He doesn't feel threatening or menacing, but I'm still scared out of my mind because there's a guy in my room in the middle of the night staring at me. This time the line between asleep and awake is even blurrier in my head. Am I asleep? Are my eyes open? I don't know, but I'm afraid to find out. I can feel my husband asleep next to me, so I decide the best move is to try and discreetly wake my husband. He's still snoring with his back turned to me, but my hand is on the bed next to his back, so I decide to slowly move my hand closer to his back and poke him. I poked him a few times, but he's passed out and not reacting at all. I was so pissed. He's dead to the world. Finally, I decide, F this, I'm not dealing with this alone anymore, and I turn towards my husband slightly and lift myself onto my elbow, where I'm sure I'm awake, but everything before this was blurry, and I'm about to grab his arm and shake the hell out of him when I notice that the man's no longer in the chair anymore. Now I feel freaking crazy. What is going on? Where is this guy? Is he real or not? I'm so tired, confused, frustrated and scared. This man feels real. The details are so vivid, but I'm trying to sift through what is reality and what isn't. I realize I think I can only see or feel this guy when I'm asleep. I pray to myself that that's the end of it. I'm trying to convince myself that this is just my brain creating an elaborate lucid dream and I'm safe. And it should stop now because this is just a stupid dream and I've finally realized it. I roll towards my husband facing his back. I close my eyes and start to drift asleep. I swear it was only a few minutes later, and this time I can't see anything, but I feel the guy is looking at me. But this time while sitting in the chair that's 3 feet away from my husband's head. I open my eyes. No one is there. For the rest of the night I probably woke up every hour or so. Every time I fell asleep I could feel this man's presence in the room. He never tried to hurt us, he just watched us. All night. When I finally saw daylight through the curtains, I got up and woke my husband and told him we'd got to leave. I tried not to alarm him or my son. I just got them up and dressed, and I think we were out of that hotel room by 7:30 a.m. The whole thing had a surreal quality to it, because with the exception of a few distinct moments, it was hard to tell when my eyes were open and when they were closed, when I was fully conscious and when I was maybe semi-conscious. There were parts of it that I could write off as a dream if they weren't so damn vivid. And the whole night, that lingering feeling of being watched, even when I couldn't see him. Every time I recount this incident to myself or someone else, I'm no closer to understanding what happened. I refuse to go back to that hotel, though.
While I totally understand her point, I can be honest with you, given a choice between haunted hotel and having to stay with my relations when I go out of town, I'm taking the haunted hotel. I'll stay in the Bates Motel before I sleep with someone else in someone else's house. The era of the sleepover is over. Bren wants a hotel. It's like when we go to England to visit my mother-in-law, you know, we stay in her house, which is lovely because obviously hotels would be very expensive given the currency conversion. But at the same time, it's like, do you want to go back to being a teenager for 2 weeks? Oh, and there's no shower, there's just a bath. Have fun stewing in your juices, you dumb bastard. Ugh, God. I mean, a bath now and then is fine. If I want to relax, that's great. But I want to feel clean. I want to shower. So anyways, I'm not a stay at people's house kind of person. I don't want to talk to anyone in the morning. And there's always rules, right? Well, we don't like to do X after a certain time of night. It's like, no, it's like an Airbnb, but someone is physically also in your space. It's like an Airbnb if someone is frogging in the vents, basically.
I mean, if I won the lottery, I'd probably live in a bath.
That's fair. We'll have to get you a waterproof microphone.
That's the only downside to it. You can't read very well in a bath other than using a Kindle. So that would be a downside. And you'd have to employ somebody to fetch me some crisps and pop and stuff. But yeah, I easily. Like Julie often says to me, like she'll come in and she'll say, I just came to check you're still alive because I've been in there like an hour.
All I can picture is Benoit Blanc in the beginning of the second Knives Out movie.
And it's got to be lava hot as well.
Of course, yeah, naturally.
I like it. I like to cook myself.
No, I don't get it. The only time I cook myself is when I go to the sauna, and then I get propositioned by gentlemen, and there's a lot of social.
See, that never happens in the bath.
Yep, I will say that. That is a point in the bath's favor, 1,000%. I
get visited by animals, but that's about it.
In the bath, you never have to think, is that gentleman bending over because his lower back is tight? Or nope, that's not it. Okay. That's more patron stuff, folks. You listen to the patron bonuses, you get to hear all about Bren's adventures in the sauna. I don't know if you want to hear, but anyways, we're going to move on. This one really... You want to let that soak for a second?
Yeah, I'm soaked by it.
But yeah, so going back to the story, I'm always interested in stuff like this because there is this particular stage of sleep that I've definitely experienced where it's like the dreams and reality start to mix a little bit and you're so tired that when you try to wake up, it's almost like sleep sucks you back down. And I remember, like, sometimes I think you're just reacting to outside stimulus and I don't think there's anything paranormal about it. Like, I remember my very first visit to LA, I was staying in a room in this woman's house in the Hollywood Hills. And funny enough, she was the ex-wife of the guy who runs the Sofitel hotel chain. So I'm in bed and I had the same thing where I'd been up quite late the night before and I was trying to sleep, but there was this horrible banging noise outside. And in my dream, sort of waking dream, this banging noise became this spirit that was trying to frighten me and kept sucking me down into sleep whenever I tried to wake up and kind of figure out what was going on. And I'm 90% sure what I heard was just the garbage collector outside just chucking the bins around. Because when I finally got out the next morning, or that morning, the bins were all empty. So I was probably just hearing garbage collection. But my brain had kind of rolled it into this larger narrative about an evil spirit.
Well, that's quite funny because I remember when I was on holiday with my family in Portugal in 1988. And as you do when you're on holiday, you'll walk past all these shops with like numerous paperbacks in racks for a few, as they were then, escudos was a currency in Portugal back then. And they'd got this book with this really funny looking alien on it. And it said Communion. And I thought, oh, that looks interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And so I bought it as a 15-year-old and I'm reading it on holiday in a foreign country late at night. And I fell asleep just at the bit after they'd come and got him at the beginning. And then at 5 a.m. I was at Walker, terrified by this crashing, banging sound. I thought, Jesus, they're here. And it was the supermarket across the road having their bins emptied.
Yeah. See?
Shit myself.
Sometimes it's just the most frightening thing is the bin man.
Yeah, it's no wonder my parents found me a couple of days later drunk in a lift at 3 a.m.
We're gonna blame Whitley for that one?
Probably, yeah. I was kidnapped by Liverpool fans.
Ah, there we go. That'll happen.
Apparently my shoes were in another lift on their own.
You were abducted.
I was. Yeah, they put me back in the wrong lift.
Someone called Mike Cleland. We had owls earlier, and now we've got someone appearing without their shoes.
I was listening to a Bud Hopkins interview the other day. He was telling a story about a man who woke up naked 3 miles away from where he fell asleep, and all his friends called him the Naked Streaker.
Oh, no.
But he'd been taken during the night and transported to one of the people who he'd been with the night before's house.
I mean, it does sound like he just got hammered and went streaking.
Fair play to him if you want to do that in January in England. Good luck to you.
Well,
there'll not be much on show.
Yeah, well, there is that. But I feel like you reach a certain point of drunkenness where it just stops mattering. I mean, not to me, but I feel like there's probably, for someone, there's that limit.
I've never found a limit that makes me want to streak.
Nope, me, well, okay, I took my pants off once in a restaurant. But it was a nice restaurant. For Revelstoke, it's a very nice restaurant. But I wasn't naked. I just took my pants off and I swam across. There was like a deck covered by snow, and then there was a hot tub. It was like a staff Christmas party. I used to drink a lot more.
Are you drinking crack?
I honestly don't remember anymore. It's a good thing my bosses were. It's one thing I'll say for them. They rolled with those punches, because I look back now and I realize that's like Christmas party mistake 101. You know.
I've seen worse things on staff dues.
Oh, I'm sure you have. If anyone has. I mean, didn't someone shit on the boss's desk or something? Or there was a shit?
No, that was at my high school.
That's
somebody
it.
Somebody shit on the headmaster's desk. Ironically, my headmaster at high school was called Michael Myers.
Right.
He was very tall as well. He could have been Michael Myers.
Who's to say?
It was the 80s.
That's it. We all age out of these things eventually. There was a gap between sequels.
He was the headmaster of a rough and ready high school in the north of England.
There's that movie.
between Halloween 3 and Halloween 4.
The uplifting story of one man who just wanted to murder, but life had other plans.
Well, to be fair, there were stranger characters than that wandering about where I grew up.
No, in a world that gave us Shotgun Frank, I'm not surprised by this.
Yeah. We had some weird people.
Give me one, before we go back to aliens and weird shit, give me one weird person. Hey, folks, this is me coming in after the fact. So I should have known that when I asked Paul to tell me something weird, he was going to tell me something weird. I was not thinking. So this is a combination of funny and disturbing. Deals with some relatively unpleasant characters, stuff happening to kids. If that's at all an issue for you, I would just skip about a minute ahead. Yeah, that should do you.
Well, it was those halcyon days where every village had a sex offender living there.
I don't think that's changed.
Yeah, there was one guy who lived in the next village to us. Everybody used to call him Ten Bob Tim, because he always used to go up to people and tell them he'd got 10 bob was 50 pence. A bob was 5p, so 10 bob. We had 50 pence pieces here are called 10 bobs. Well, depending where you are. In the north, in the proper part of England, they're called 10 bobs. And he used to go around and approach children and say he'd got 10 bob in his pocket. When kids put their hands in his pocket, there was no lining in it.
Oh! Well, I'll be putting a content warning in for that one. Oh...
Yeah, he kept having accidents in. Every time you'd see him, he looked like he'd fallen down some stairs. He had black eyes. It was weird.
Bad luck. Some people just have bad luck.
Yeah. There was, and we had a.
Folks, I'm sorry. I should have known when I asked.
we had a village punk as well.
Just one.
Just
the
one.
Only punk in the village.
And whenever it was the Christmas disco, he'd always harass the DJ to play the Sex Pistols. And then he'd play the Sex Pistols, and then he'd just pogo around the dance floor on his own for 3 minutes, like scattering small children who were wanting to dance to Kylie.
God almighty.
Everywhere. And then he'd get thrown out every year.
It's good to have traditions.
It was. The Christmas tradition, yeah. Throw the tosser out.
It's funny, actually. I was at the drugstore today, and it's one of those places that sell, groceries along with everything else. And there was a sign. They were selling, ready-made pizzas, but the tagline was hand tossed in Italy. And I thought, I'm listening. Tell me more. Hong Kong. So it all happened back in April 2016 when I was traveling with my parents and my younger brother to visit relatives in Hong Kong. We always stayed in this area called Sha Tin, as it was easy for us to navigate the public transport to all the places my relatives lived from there. Mom found a really good deal for a 10-day stay at a hotel in the area. It was at a hotel we'd stayed at years ago, and while it was not as convenient as our usual place, it was ridiculously good value for a 4-star hotel. We arrived late afternoon evening and checked in as normal. The first thing I noticed when we walked into the room was that it was a little shabbier than I'd expected for a 4-star hotel. When you walked in, on your left was one of those closets where you hang up your coats and stuff. About 2 steps ahead on the right was the bathroom, and opposite that a little nook where there was a teapot, tea, coffee, mini fridge, and so on. From there, the room opens up to a double bed and 2 single beds, plus a TV, typical setup of a slightly larger hotel room. As soon as I walked in, I noticed the closet light kept flicking on and off, even while the closet door was closed. I didn't think much of it because the room looked pretty old, and I figured it was just badly maintained. So, having gotten off a long flight, I really needed to pee, so I headed straight for the bathroom. When I stepped in, I was shocked to discover that the lighting in the bathroom had this horrible greenish tinge. The bathroom was a bit worse for wear, but not unusable. The corners were all dark and grimy, like they hadn't been cleaned for a while, and there was a slate loose in the ceiling that looked like someone had kicked it in. With the greenish light, it had a really strong horror movie vibe about it. To top it off, as I did my business and while washing my hands, I had this distinct feeling of being watched. Not just watched from a distance, but it felt as if someone was standing really close behind me with their head next to mine. Being tired, I told myself I was just imagining things, finished up, and walked out. It felt so creepy, though. I found myself literally shaking it off as I walked out. My brother went in after me and came out shortly thereafter. He gave me a look as if to say, "What the fuck?" Realizing he was as creeped out as I was, I nodded and said simply, "I know, right?" We both decided there was something off about the bathroom, but considering our parents seemed fine with it and we were only going to be there for a few days, we just shrugged it off. Yes, it felt a little creepy, but I figured that if we left it, whatever it was, alone, then it'll leave us alone. How bad could it be? The next few days were okay. Outside of the bathroom, everything felt normal. So my plan was, 1, pee as quickly as possible. 2, shower as quickly as possible. 3, stay away from the bathroom unless absolutely necessary. The worst thing was really that the bathroom had this huge mirror that ran all the way from entrance to the bathtub shower, and you could see yourself in that mirror all the time. Every time I washed my hands or showered, I had this overwhelming feeling that something invisible was staring back at me through the mirror. I can't explain it, but I just felt like if I didn't keep my guard up, at some point if I looked away and looked back, I would see something that might scare the life out of me. Was it all in my head? One day after we came back from shopping for gifts, I was super excited because we had shopped for baby clothes for my cousin's daughter, who was about to be born. We were taking photos of all the clothes and toys we bought, and then I realized I needed to use the bathroom. As usual, I threw open the door and walked in, but I was practically floored because the green lighting was gone. The bathroom looked and felt super normal. I wasn't scared, and I didn't feel creeped out. The mirror, everything felt fine. It was totally normal. I realized, oh my God, I really am nuts. I imagined this the whole time. It was great. I finished up and went back outside to fuss over all the presents some more. At some point, my brother was peering at the air conditioner control and he asked, "Hey, did you change the temperature?" Confused, I responded, "No." "Mom? Dad?" he asked. They both shook their heads. He called us over and, startled, we noticed that somehow the temperature had been set to something ridiculously low, like 11 or 13 degrees Celsius or something. My mom brushed it off as faulty and set it back up to 18 again. The key point is that I have really bad asthma, which is triggered by cold temperature/dry air, so we never set the aircon that low. My brother and I exchanged looks, but we didn't say anything. On the way out to dinner that night, we were on the train, and my brother and I finally decided to tell our parents, but horrifyingly, the situation was much worse than I expected. Turns out that while I had just been feeling creeped out, my brother had an entirely different experience. My brother's experience of the room. He said that on the first day, yes, he felt the same as me, like he was being watched. But on top of that, while he was showering, he thought he heard me call him by his nickname, which is something only our family calls him. He actually answered, "What?" When I didn't respond, he felt scared and he tried again. No response. When he told us this, I vehemently denied ever calling out to him while he was showering. He said it sounded like I was just on the other side of the door. I told him my entire plan there was to stay the fuck away from that bathroom at all times. I didn't even hover at the kettle area simply because it freaked me out so much to even be close to it, so there was no way I was going to stand there and call out to him. Then, the next day, he saw what looked like muddy, dark, bare feet footprints next to the toilet. It freaked him out, but as we decided to just sort of live with it for the next few days, he didn't say anything. Finally, the night before, he was showering, and when he glanced away and then back at the mirror, he saw a young woman with long, dark hair standing right next to the toilet in the mirror. Yes, he saw it. He reflexively shut his eyes and said something to the effect of, "Please stop that. It's really scaring me." He opened his eyes and it was gone. He also explained that he had the strong feeling that the young woman had once hidden under the space under the bathroom bench, which gave me and him the creeps. In retrospect, my parents and I started realizing a lot of weird things about the room and the behavior of the staff around us. Realization 1. Everyone knew but us. For example, one day we were pretty tired and decided to just chill at the hotel until late afternoon. The cleaner came by and we mentioned that we're happy for her to just collect the used towels and leave new ones in the bathroom. This lovely middle-aged lady walked in and was friendly enough, albeit a little shy. We were all within view, but because the bathroom door was closed, Mum said to her, "Oh, it's okay, there's no one in there." The cleaner nodded and, weirdly, despite hearing Mum explain already, she knocked on the door before entering. My parents, brother, and I looked at each other, a little confused. Language was definitely not an issue. We speak the same language and had spoken with her previously. She left after giving us our daily bottled water refills and towels, and that was that. The daily bottle refreshes and housekeeping was also weird. The beds always looked like they were made up really quickly, not with the usual type of care you get at hotels. The refilled bottles were never set on the bedside table like they usually are, but always just dumped near the kettle, closer to the door, and at the time we figured it was just because the room was so cheap. Every morning when we left the room, any staff nearby would stare weirdly at us and smile awkwardly. This is pretty weird for Hong Kong hotels because we don't look different. Usually they just kind of ignored you, and it's not like we were staying in some VIP room or something. I always thought we were just giving heavy foreign-born Chinese vibes or something, but thinking back, I think they were looking to see if we were acting funny because they knew the room was dodgy. Realization 2. It was listening to us. When it called out to my brother, it wasn't by his real name. It was by the nickname we call him. Literally no one else calls him that. Also, we had mentioned a few times in conversation how we needed to make sure the aircon wasn't too low because of my asthma. It was summer in Hong Kong and incredibly humid, so my brother joked a few times about how setting the aircon super low would feel better, but might kill me. Realization 3. Define technology. The hotel aircon control does not go below 17 degrees Celsius. Most aircons don't, in our experience, so when we saw the setting in the room, it made no sense. My brother said the reason he walked over there was because when I went to the bathroom, he swore he saw, in the corner of his eye, a white mist hover near the aircon controls. When he walked over, he noticed the incredibly low setting, and that's when he asked us about it. After listening to us, my mom went white as a sheet. She and Dad decided we'd ask for a room switch immediately. It was the calling out to my brother in the aircon that freaked her out the most. In Chinese folklore, there are legends about ghosts wanting company and would lure people to accidental deaths by scaring them or calling out to them. She was afraid that the ghost was trying to latch onto my brother, considering he was the only one who saw or heard her. Mom also had a theory that, given that I'm super protective of my family, it may have decided that I was in the way, or I had pissed it off somehow. We figured that unknowingly, my excitedness and cheerfulness had offset some of the energy in the bathroom that day, knocking it out of its territory, which was why I suddenly felt like everything was normal in the bathroom. I'd accidentally knocked her out of it or something. So, because I pissed it off, it turned down the aircon in an attempt to mess with me. When we went back and told the front desk we wanted to switch rooms, the young man at the desk looked slightly uncomfortable. Mom just explained, we're just very uncomfortable with the room. Look, we'd really like to change rooms. We're only here for a few more days, so if we can't, we're happy to just check out now. The guy didn't even look surprised. Weirdly, without asking any more questions, he told us he'd change our rooms. He would give us a new key to another room on a different level and explained that once we'd cleared out of our old room to just come back and give him the key. To us, that was a little weird, especially since he didn't even question it, nor did he offer to come up with us or check anything. We didn't care, though. We went upstairs and packed up all our stuff. By this stage, I was freaking out inside a bit because the gravity of what my brother had told us was sinking in. I told my parents to leave anything that didn't belong to us in the room. I'd watched enough movies to know that these things can attach themselves to objects, right? So I was like, leave the water bottles, leave the toiletries, we'll get new ones. I even left my personal toothbrush in there. I wanted nothing that had stayed in that bathroom for a prolonged period of time. We checked into the room upstairs and were shocked to realize everything we suspected seemed to be true. The room was exactly the same structure, but so much neater. The bathroom lighting was normal, still old and a little dirty, but not creepy at all. The refill water bottles were neatly placed on the bedside tables, with the hotel cardboard tags attached. The other room had none of those nice finishes. The beds were properly made, tucked in corners and everything. We realized that the other room must have been known as haunted, so the cleaners would just rush to tidy up, dump whatever they needed to dump, and leave as quickly as possible. It also explained why the cleaner insisted on knocking on the door to our bathroom first before entering. In Chinese folklore, it's polite to announce yourself before you walk into a ghost's territory by knocking on the door first. The theory is that if they don't want to mess with you, they'll have an opportunity to leave or hide. Horrifyingly, Mom realized that she'd accidentally left one of the drink bottles from the other room in her handbag. Calmly, she wrapped it in some Buddhist beads she carried with her everywhere and explained, "We'll throw it out tomorrow somewhere, don't worry." I was still a little scared, but my brother was just happy we had left that other room. That night, while we slept, for no reason at all, I woke up. I had my back to the entry hallway of the room. I could see my brother in the bed next to mine, and I could hear my parents breathing or snoring in their sleep in the bed behind me. Despite this, I could feel someone watching me from the hallway. I was wide awake and so scared out of my mind I could barely move. I remember being very aware of my own breathing. I told myself I was just traumatized and that if I just turned around, I would see nothing and there would be nothing to be afraid of. So I lifted myself off the bed a bit and turned. There, standing in the darkness, I saw a silhouette of a person, medium height, standing right next to my mom's handbag where the bottle was. I nearly shit myself. I turned quickly around and pulled my covers up over my shoulders and wrenched my eyes shut. I don't know how, but I fell asleep. When we woke up in the morning, we went out for breakfast. Mom threw the bottle out in one of the shopping center bins, and afterwards, nothing weird happened. This was one of the most frightening things I've ever experienced, and the residual effect of this meant that I kept running into all these weird things like this for the next 2 years. Luckily, something as bad as this never happened again. And I think that might be one of the longest stories we've told on this show, Paul.
It was an epic.
It really was. And I got to say, man, I think they handled it reasonably well. I don't know how I would handle having someone appear that had clearly followed me from the other room, though. I think that would send me into paroxysms of terror.
Perhaps it was just lonely.
It doesn't sound lonely. It just doesn't. I as you know, I don't like to jump to malevolence, right off the bat, but this doesn't sound great.
I think we need to be a bit more understanding here. Even ghosts have feelings too.
Well, I'm not going to say anything. No, that's not true. This ghost sounds like a real son of a bitch.
I'm more concerned about where the haunted bin is.
That is the haunted bin's issue.
I mean, there are several hotels. I'm trying to think. There's one in the States where I know there is a notorious haunted room that people don't like to clean it. And they run in or they go in pairs because nobody wants to do it on their own. trying to think where that is.
There was one like that in Victoria, the Harbour Towers. I remember I used to know a woman who was a chambermaid there, and she'd said that there was a room that if you wanted a buddy when you cleaned it, no one asked questions. You were encouraged to ask. I remember she told me she cleaned it by herself one day, and she cleaned the whole room. There was no one in there. Came back out, closed the door behind her, and as she was prepping her cart, a man opened the door and walked out. And she's like, there's no way. I was in that entire room. That man was not in there. But all of a sudden he's there and he's walking out. And apparently that was one of the rooms. And I seem to recall hearing the same thing about Laurel Point Hotel in Victoria, which is also, that place is haunted as shit.
And to be fair, it obviously took a shine to the brother, I think.
Yeah, it certainly seemed to. At the sister's expense.
Love struck as well. Lonely and love struck. I'm warming to this ghost.
Did the ghost pay you off or something? You are weirdly team ghost on this one. Like, well, he's just trying to kill the sister, but he did it for love. And I just imagine a ghost slipping you an envelope full of bills. It's like the runaway jury, but with a ghost. That's a John Grisham joke, kids. Ask your grandparents.
No, it seems I don't know. I don't know why I'm viewing this in a more positive light.
Neither do I.
Perhaps Mr. Wiggles is still in me.
That's a Late Night with the Devil joke, folks. Again, if this is your first episode, go watch Late Night with the Devil.
Yes, go, but don't go on your own.
No. Horror movies are always more fun with friends.
Yes, it helps to have someone to hold on to.
That too.
To be fair, I'm not surprised there's haunted hotels in Hong Kong.
No, well, funny enough, I did a little bit of reading, and that Sha Tin neighborhood is also the site of the campus for the Chinese University of Hong Kong.
Yes.
You're familiar?
I'm familiar with one particular story about the braided girl.
Oh, so you're familiar with the braided girl?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's so well known a story that one of the streets has actually been renamed after it, I think, hasn't it?
Yeah, they call it Single Braid Road. It's just behind the Chung Chi. They call it the Chung Chi Canteen.
Yes, she's supposed to have met her end in a horrific train-related incident, I believe.
Oh, is that the story?
She's supposed to be horrifically scarred. Yeah, I think you see her from behind, or she's got a braid of hair that, I don't know, and then she turns around and terrifies you, which seems to be rather similar to that Japanese ghost with the slashed mouth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I should know this. I edit all the...
Who asks people if you think she's beautiful, and there's no right way to answer the question.
That's something Anna is the name. Starts with a K and it's something Anna. Again, Luke has done a number of episodes on yokai. I should know this, but I want to say Kuchisake Anna.
Yeah, apparently she tried to jump off a train and didn't make it.
Oh, okay. So when I was looking that up, I found a couple different versions, but it seems to be like sometimes she has no face. She has like no face. It's just like a Slender Man-esque oval of skin, or there's the like sort of traditional Chinese ghost where the hair is over the face.
Yep.
And then there's the one with the mangled face.
But that's quite a famous Hong Kong ghost. Mind you, that whole campus is haunted as anything by all accounts. Yeah,
I found an article in the South China Morning Post, and I'm actually I'll be reading it for patrons. So if you're a patron at the $5 level and above, or an Apple Podcast subscriber, you'll have me reading this South China Post article about this. But yeah, there was a professor of anthropology there in 2004 who did a 9-year study and collected more than 100 ghost stories from students on campus.
Yeah, you've got a haunted toilet.
Oh, do they have a haunted toilet?
Yeah, and it's one of them that there are people have seen two different types of ghosts. One's a woman and one's a man.
Interesting. Is there any difference in the behavior?
Yeah. The man is supposed to have been a labourer who died during the construction and is allegedly seen to be laying bricks, but he's got blood all over his hands.
Oh, interesting.
And the girl is supposed to be weeping as she took her own life in the toilet. but it's a man's toilet as well.
Well, I've seen some stuff in the men's toilet that made me want to weep, Paul, so I get it.
But I'm not too sure. I'm sure I read somewhere that originally it was a ladies' toilet, and then they changed it to a man's toilet to improve the yin and yang of the building. Oh, I don't know.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I'm not sure if that's right. It seems that's what I seem to remember about that particular. But there's tons of them. There's like 6 or 7 ghosts attached to this campus.
Interesting. Yeah, it's, as I say, according to that article, it was a deeply haunted place. And again, if you're a patron at $5 and up, you'll hear that. I don't necessarily agree with the anthropologist's conclusions in the article, but I think some of the stuff they have to say is interesting nonetheless.
Well, can't be any worse than the author's feelings on Files of the Unexplained about the Myrtles plantation.
So I haven't watched the Myrtles Plantation episode yet, just because I feel like I've heard so many stories about Myrtles that it interests me less. Well,
she's an Australian author who just seems to be coming at it that all ghosts are just folklore and everybody makes them up.
Oh, so that was the conclusion of the anthropologist at the university in Hong Kong as well.
The arrogance of a doctorate.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Millions of people are wrong. I'm right.
Yeah, I had to go through 10 years of school for this bullshit. I may as well. Actually, I don't even know if that's true for just a doctorate. I know this medical doctor thing. I don't know. I never went to higher education. I don't understand these things.
I think I've only watched 4 of them, I think. I've watched the Myrtles one, Pascagoula, Yuba, and Lake Lanier.
Okay, so I've seen Pascagoula, Yuba, and part of Mount Shasta. But I thought the Pascagoula one was really interesting, because I know you've spoken to Calvin Parker.
Yes, the man that convinced me that abductions are a real phenomenon, yeah.
Oh, it was him. For some reason, I thought it was a Devil's Den guy.
Terry's also on an episode.
Oh, I knew that, but yeah, I didn't realize it was Calvin that had tipped that over for you.
Yeah. Calvin was the first abductee I ever spoke to on the show, and he was also the first person that made me recontemplate. Is that a word?
Reconsider?
Reconsider, that's the right word, Paul, yes. Sorry. English isn't my first language, clearly. It made me reconsider the phenomenon in a more balanced and mature light, because I absolutely believe him.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to watch that one first. Actually, that's not true. I watched Yuba first, but we'll talk about Pascagoula first. And just quickly, for our listeners who don't know, again, we're talking about the new Netflix series, Files of the Unexplained, and specifically the first episode, or at least it's the first in Canada, about the Pascagoula abduction of Calvin Parker and what was the other fellow's name?
Charles Hickson.
Charles Hickson. That's it. It happened in 1973. I knew you'd know.
Is it October the 11th, I think? October 11th, 12th? Something like
that. That's why I left the date to you. I knew it was the 70s. I just watched it this morning. I'm just bad with dates.
It's one of those that it's one of those cases that's been lost for a long time. It was very big at the time because Charles Hickson was everywhere. He appeared on television. He did national syndicated interviews with newspapers. He even made a record about it, which Philip Mantle has a copy of. But it's just such a weird case because, like I say, it was quite big for a few years after it happened. And obviously Calvin didn't talk about it for 44 years.
I was shocked to learn he didn't even tell his own wife about it for 18 years.
Yeah.
That was incredible. I can't imagine not telling it's just a different time. I mean, I don't, like, if something happens that important, like Nick and I talk every day, for Christ's sakes. I just can't imagine being like, no.
Yeah. And so it was only towards the latter part of his life, because obviously sadly Calvin passed away last year. This was the last interview he ever gave.
Oh, I wondered about that.
Yeah, he was seriously ill with cancer, sadly.
Oh man!
But he wanted to set the record straight, and like I say, when I spoke to him, one of the first year of doing the show, and I just found him a deeply sincere and honest man who had had a very strange and traumatic experience. The fact that I mean, off the top of my head now, I think there's about 35 witnesses. So this is probably the most witnessed abduction event in UFO history.
Would that include Westall and...
Well, nobody was abducted, were they?
Oh, abducted, of course, or abduction, right.
Obviously, it's not the largest. I mean, the Felix Lights would probably be the largest
of course.
sighting. But yeah, Westall's a good case, and another incredible case as well. But I mean, there was a couple who were abducted across the other side of the river at the same time.
Oh, really? I don't believe that was mentioned. I know there were witnesses mentioned, but they didn't mention
there's loads. There were loads of people.
Really?
Yeah. And it's a strange case because I remember as well, I spoke to a wonderful gentleman from Greece, Stefanos Pagalokis, who I've got to know very well. He's a lovely, lovely man. And he even came over to the UK in 2019 for a conference where I met him. Smashing fella. He was a merchant. This is sometimes the weird things that happen in weirdness. So he was a radio operator in the Greek merchant navy, and he had a trip planned, and then the day before he was supposed to go, it was cancelled, and he was put onto another ship that would be calling at Pascagoula. And he was really excited because he was involved in Greek ufology at the time, and he knew about the Pascagoula case. This was about late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
I think. And so he ended up knowing that they were going to be docking in Pascagoula for a few days. And so he thought, right, well, I'm going to have a wander around and see if I can find people and speak to them. I think he ended up meeting Charles Hickson, but he ended up bumping into another witness who, incredibly, was a Greek immigrant from Kefalonia. And so he then said, oh, yeah, I know all these people. And he basically took him round to several people's houses and introduced them and found all these witnesses. And so Stefanos, 45 years ago, was aware of it and how many witnesses there were then.
Oh,
so it just shows you that because it wasn't in English or in American literature, it kind of just bubbled away for 40 years.
Fascinating. So this guy wrote about it, but in Greek.
Yeah, it was in a Greek UFO magazine in the early 80s.
Son of a bitch.
And then it was republished. Once Philip Mantle over here rediscovered the case, he republished Stefanos's articles and they were expanded. So Stefanos has done a book on it. Calvin did too, and I think Philip's done one. But it's the thing like the police hiding the tape recorder in the office when they were at the police station. I mean, that alone tells you that something happened.
That was compelling because, and as I recall, that tape, one, they didn't know they were being recorded. And
Nope.
As one of the witnesses in the documentary says, this would have been the ideal time to kind of be like, all right, so we got our shit together, right? We're going to do this, this, and this, and this is what we're going to say. And instead, they're just kind of trying to process what they've seen.
Yeah, well, Calvin sounds terrified on it.
Yeah, he does. Hickson seems very different. Like Parker, I very much sympathize with Parker, but Hickson seemed, I don't know, much colder about the whole thing.
Yeah, well, apparently Hickson was a well-decorated Korean War veteran.
Right, so...
And I was told he'd seen some shit. I
see. So he had a higher threshold. He looked like a hard man. He had hard eyes.
Yes. So I'm not exactly sure what he was aware of, but I know war is never for the faint of heart.
Of course, yeah.
Sadly. But yeah, you got that. You got the couple over there. You've got people who saw the lights. There's people who were on the bridge. The lights flew over them. You've got the recordings. You've got the hypnosis. They were taken to a military base where they were examined. They've got the records of that. So they were given a full medical. They found strange pinpricks on their feet and legs.
Also not mentioned in the documentary.
No, there was tons not mentioned in it.
Interesting. I wonder why they shied away from all that stuff.
I don't know. Was it editing, budgeting? I mean, the Lake Lanier episode features a local official who is flat out lying on it.
Really?
Yeah, he says there's absolutely no graves in Lake Lanier. I know there is, mate, because I've seen them.
I was going to say, I thought that was a fairly well-acknowledged fact.
No, he's sits there and denies it. They don't question it. They don't disprove it. They just let him say it.
Oh boy, if this thing was produced by Joe Rogan, apparently.
Yeah, well, he said hunters don't see Bigfoot the other week, so what does he know?
Joe Rogan did.
Yeah, he said no, there are no witness reports from hunters in regards to Bigfoot.
Well, again, I got nothing against Joe Rogan personally, but I just, you can't listen to that man and expect legitimate information. He vets nothing. He just says shit, and he just lets people say shit.
Yeah, because I didn't know about that, but I know Justin Chernopeski, who runs the brilliant Mountain Beast Mysteries channel on YouTube, mentioned that somebody'd asked him about it, and he just said, I find that laughable, that somebody's talking about Bigfoot and makes a claim like that that's got absolutely no truth to it.
Woof. Anyways, he doesn't need any more. He doesn't need more airtime.
Yes, but other than that, yeah. I mean, like the Yuba one has one of the nieces claimed that she saw one of the group in a bar. What?
Yeah.
What? I mean, she's convinced that he killed the rest of them.
Oh, so she thought she saw Gary.
Yes. She claimed she saw him in a bar and she was going to go and speak to him and he ran off. There's no record of that ever being reported. And if you saw him, would you not call the police immediately?
Well, one would think. And presumably the bar, there were other people in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just quickly, Paul, I mean, again, how much of this will stay in the show, I don't know, because this segment's already almost 40 minutes long. But can you just briefly summarize the Yuba County Five?
Yeah. So 5 friends, all with varying mental challenges, were part of a project basketball team and had decided the night before their biggest game of their lives to go and watch their favourite college team play in the little town of Chico in California, a place that they'd visited before. They went, watched the game, no one reported anything odd. They came out of the game, they went to a local convenience store, they bought some snacks. The cashier remembered them because it really annoyed her that they came in just as she was trying to lock up, and it pissed her off. And they bought loads of like milk and cookies and candy and stuff. And that was the last time anybody saw them alive. The car was found 3 days later, abandoned 70 miles from where they should have been, on a deserted mountainside road in the middle of winter. And nobody knew what the hell had happened. And then 3 months later, some bikers were in the area about 15, 20 miles away, came across a cabin, noticed it had been broken into, opened the door, were hit by the smell of death to discover that one of the 5 was wrapped in the bed, dead, but had clearly been alive for some time due to the amount of growth, facial hair growth on their face. And then the search restarted because they'd given up after about 3 weeks. Because this was at the end of February, 78. And then they gave up the search probably towards the end of March. And then these bikers discovered the body June, I think. And so they did a big search of the area. And that's where they found the remains of 3 of the others, one of whom was discovered by his father, who found his shirt. And as he picked his shirt up, his spine fell out of it. Because the other 3 had all died outside of the cabin and basically had been predated on by the local animals. There was nothing to identify them other than bones and teeth and the clothes, the rags that were left. And Gary, there was no sign of Gary in or outside of the cabin. His shoes were in the cabin, but that's it. And no, they've never found anything. However, that's not to say he didn't die outside. And the same thing happened to him that happened to the other 3, that his remains were just scattered, because that's what animals do when they find a corpse. They will, pick bits up and run with it, take it away with them. So the rest of him could be out there somewhere. So yeah, there's nobody knows why they were there. Yes, people have pointed out to the fact that some of them were not of full mental capacity, but as the families say, these were not stupid people. These were people who had challenges, but two of them could drive, so they had the mental capacity to be able to pass a driving test. 2 of them had been in the army. They all had jobs, and the fact that, some of the newspaper reports at the time are quite deeply offensive.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the headlines, you're just like, what? And I don't want to repeat anything that was printed, but it takes your breath away. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that the officials just went, well, you know what people like this are like.
Oh, yeah.
And just didn't give a shit. Because I will guarantee you, if it had been 5 college kids, they'd have carpet bombed the area for 3 months.
100%. Yep, I agree completely.
And just because it was 5 guys with varying challenges of ability, they just thought, well, serves them right. Why? You know for a fact that they would have gone, well, you know what people like that like. Why should we waste our time doing that? As with anything, same with when sex workers disappear.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's risky work. They know what they're doing.
Yep.
They just don't give a shit.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Well, especially not then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. Especially, rural places like that, rural California in the 70s, it's not surprising that no one that they didn't put a whole bunch of effort. And especially in a small town, I think listening to, what's her name? Is it Marissa Jones? She does the Vanished podcast or the Vanishing podcast. It's a really fabulous show about missing people. But the number of cases she's covered on those shows where small town sheriffs have just swept things under the rug for years. But anyways, what I'm saying is I think small towns, I think it's maybe sometimes easier to keep secrets than, especially back then. I think I think the closing of the ranks is a real thing.
I know it's not Bigfoot.
Well, slow down now. Now who's jumping to conclusions? We don't know.
I'd be more liable to suggest UFOs than Bigfoot.
It's fine. No one ever sees Bigfoot. Joe Rogan told us so.
Thank God. Dallas. I stayed at the Magnolia Hotel in downtown Dallas this past Sunday through Thursday. I visit Dallas occasionally for work, and I had actually stayed at the Magnolia before about 3 years ago. Even though the hotel is old and one could say it's creepy by nature, dim lighting, old decor and such like, my last stay was extremely pleasant. I just thought it was a cool historic hotel with big rooms in a great location, which is why I booked it again. This time, however, that was not the case. I got in Sunday evening and there was a funky smell in the lobby. It was pungent, kind of like those flowers that smell like vomit. I didn't think anything of it. It's in an extra touristy part of Dallas, and it could have actually been the smell of vomit. Who knows? There was one man at the front desk who got me checked in quickly. I had booked a regular room, and he said he was upgrading me to a suite since I was staying for 4 nights. I was excited about the upgrade, thanked him, and walked to the elevators to go to my room 2202 on the 22nd floor. The elevators opened, and the first notable thing was how hot it was. Dallas is quite warm right now, but the lobby was comfortable, and this felt more like the heating was on. Hot, stuffy air. I didn't think anything of it, other than it was weird of them for keeping the heating on, as it'd been almost 90 degrees over there. The floors are pretty big with 2 halls, one to the left and one to the right immediately after you get out of the elevator. Mine was to the left, and I passed maybe 6 other rooms when I got to mine. I opened the door, and I don't know how else to describe it other than it had a really bad vibe. It was dark and dingy, and it just felt bad in there. Like from the hallway to my room felt totally different energy. It was weird because I felt kind of scared and fearful, but I wasn't sure why. Just like I couldn't control the feeling from my mind or my gut or whatever. Or wherever the hell fear comes from. I tried turning on more lights to make things look less creepy, but all the fixtures are so old, so even with every light on, it was still pretty dim. I didn't want to overthink it, so I unpacked and went out to grab some dinner. I came back to the hotel and just went through the same motions. The noticeably bad smell in the lobby, the noticeably warm 22nd floor, and that awful feeling that came over me as I walked into my room. I started getting ready for bed, and that's when the weird shit started happening. There are lots of shiny surfaces in the room, like 2 TV screens, glass tabletops, and framed art. Every time I looked towards one of these objects, there would be some kind of unexplained movement in it. I wasn't seeing a specific image or anything. It was more like a reflection or a shadow walking past behind me, or a weird shift in the lighting or glare. I would hold still and try to look behind me and just try and understand what was happening, but I couldn't make sense of it. I would hold still and look behind me to try and understand what was happening, but I couldn't make sense of it. The room was a suite, so it was pretty big. It was laid out long with a small kitchenette when you enter, a dining and TV area, bedroom and bathroom. There were 3 or 4 times where I'd be in one area and see something walk by in the room next to me out of the corner of my eye. It was one of the most unsettling feelings I've ever had, but I just kept thinking I had to be imagining things. I was about to go to bed when I heard a loud noise coming from the closet. It was like the sound made when you open a shower curtain really fast and those metal hooks roll against a metal rod. I opened the closet, and the 5 pieces of clothing I had on hangers were all swaying slightly back and forth. At that point, I thought I was going crazy. Sleep was obviously difficult after all that, but I really tried, convincing myself that I needed to sleep so I'd stop imagining things. At about 1:30 in the morning, my body got incredibly hot, which was confusing because my room didn't feel hot, and the bed still felt comfortable. I fell asleep for about 30 minutes and woke up startled. I didn't hear or see anything, but it was that feeling you get when someone shakes you while you're sleeping and you wake up abruptly and confused. Then a few seconds later, I felt a tug at the end of my bed towards my feet, like someone was pulling lightly on my sheets. I screamed and got up to turn the lights on. I was super scared at this point, looking all around the room trying to at least find something. I even considered calling the front desk, but for some reason didn't. Instead, I left the lights on, looked at my phone for a while, and had maybe 2 hours of really terrible, fitful sleep. I wake up tired but feeling all right, all things considered. I set the thermostat to 60 and blearily went to work. That night I went to dinner with some co-workers and they asked me how my hotel was. For whatever reason, I had this feeling come over me, like I wasn't supposed to talk about what happened, at least not at that time. I got back to my room at that night, and within the first few seconds an opaque shadow that looked like a tall man walked by again, but this time just inches away from me. I called my boyfriend and told him what I saw, and he said I had to be imagining things, but if I was really worried to call the front desk and ask someone to check my room. Once again, I had a feeling come over me telling me not to talk about what was going on, and that I should stay. These events ended up happening every single night. It was almost like I was living with a roommate. There was constant movement. Someone would walk past me in an adjacent door frame throughout the entire stay. The reflective surfaces would continue showing unexplained activity in them. My body would get boiling hot at around 1:30 in the morning, and I'd wake up confused, followed by the tugging at my feet. I kind of got used to it. Don't get me wrong, I was absolutely terrified the entire time, but I had this feeling like I had to keep quiet and get through it. The last 2 nights also felt a bit different. I was still scared because of all this wild shit happening, but I didn't feel like I was in danger. As I was checking out on my final day, I waited for the other guests to clear the front desk area and went up to the one young girl working there. I asked her if anyone ever reported paranormal or unexplained things happening at the hotel. She said no, but she was new and not sure. Then she asked me what room I was in, and she said, "Oh, that's weird. They told me never to put people in that hole." She then asked me again who checked me in, and when I told her, she didn't know anybody that fitted the description. Again, she said she hadn't been working there very long. I didn't take it too seriously, and to be fair, I felt delirious at this point. I was waiting for people to pop out like I'd been on some kind of prank TV show or something. 5 stars.
I will say, part of me thinks that if I worked in a hotel, I would just say things like that to people. "Oh, no, that person has never worked here."
Well, how do we know that that person did work there?
Exactly. That's it. There are so many variables, and I would use every single one of them to screw with a guest.
Bit weird. It's strange, isn't it? Like, towards the end there, that it happened over 4 nights, but the last 2 nights, they were scared, and it was annoying, but they didn't feel they were in danger. So was it just haunted?
You know, it reminded me of a lot of what I went through working in for Cortex back in the day when we worked in the haunted office building, you know, where we had the first Ghost Story Guy studio. Like, because it was like that for me. There were times where I was legitimately, you know, kind of uncomfortable and scared, but at the same time, I would just, well, I'm here, so I'll just stay, I guess. It's this weird thing that I don't. It was almost like it was trying to get you to stay there. Like there was some value to it in having you there, and so it wanted you to just stay. It's fine, just stay. Like being in a shitty relationship or something. Like, oh no, this is fine, and the whole time it's just draining your life force from you.
Why are they getting warm?
You know, that reminded me of the story we had on the Mysteries of the Black Mist episode. Remember, there was a kid. They woke up in the night, and they were like being smothered by some like black mist. And one of the things they said that, because usually we'd expect it to be cold, but what ended up happening was they said they were actually really warm.
There's lots of different phenomenon going on. I mean, what's rattling about in the closet? What's lurking in the shadows and in the peripheral vision? What wants to tug the bed? What's the heat? And then, of course, we've got the mysterious receptionist.
Yeah, I mean, the closet thing and the someone watching thing, it's sort of interesting that this story's coming up now, because basically since I've been moved into this apartment in London, I've always kind of had a bit of a thing about the bedroom. I've always just thought, it's not, you know, my first choice. Like I've always enjoyed a good sleep on the couch. But what's really interesting is I have an old Fitbit that I brought with me, and I wear it to, you know, track my steps. But one of the things it does is also it tracks your sleep, and I never look at that data because the less data I have about my medical status, the better, because I worry about things. But I've been looking at it, and I was like, oh, you know, I was check see how my sleep had been doing. And what's interesting is when I sleep on the couch, my sleep is unbroken. But when I wake up and move to the bedroom, it starts getting all kinds of erratic. And last night, funny enough, I fell asleep. I was watching this movie called First Contact, which is this independent sci-fi film about aliens that I think was at least partially inspired by the Granger Taylor story. But I kept feeling like there was something or someone watching me from the bedroom. And there was a few times where I thought I saw movement, and I just looked over, and it was nothing. But it was just the weirdest thing. And it seems to be centered around the closet. And again, I don't know if that's just because closets, generally speaking, are spooky, dark places, or if there's something in particular. So I identify with this one a little bit more than usual.
Oh, yeah. It's a strange one. Like I say, the twist about the receptionist's thrown me a little. Because what's the relevance of that? Why? I mean, therefore, you could kind of suggest that, well, you could. It might be just plucking theories out the air, but was the receptionist what was in the room? And it needed somebody in there? It's some kind of psychic drainer? Is it? Does Colin Robinson live in Dallas? Perhaps whilst they're asleep, he's talking to them about spreadsheets, sucking the energy out of them, and he's tugging the bed to say thanks. I've got all the energy I need now.
Could be. The problem I have with a ghost receptionist is like there's too many steps that have to happen. Like obviously you check into a hotel, you got to show your ID and your credit card. They run a pre-auth on your credit card. You know, they got to find you. They got to find your room in the system. They got to punch all that shit in. I just feel like that's a lot of steps for a ghost. Like I struggle to imagine a ghost running a pre-authorization on someone's credit card.
Why?
I don't know. It just seems involved. Involved. Not that I think ghosts don't believe in credit cards, because at this point I don't think you can even be dead and avoid them. But I don't know. That seems like maybe a little too much for me, but it's not impossible.
I mean, obviously it's a fairly modern story because they talk about looking at their phone.
Yeah, that's it. So,
I don't know. Are ghosts aware of Equifax?
God, I hope not. Don't look at my credit score, ghost.
So yeah, it's a creepy tale, isn't it? But it's one of them. It's creepy, but it's not really they're not really being harassed by something, are they? It's just like, to be fair, it sounds like they're staying in their room.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's what it feels like. It feels like you've wandered into something else's sort of space.
Probably why they get warm is when the ghost lies down on top of them.
It's just a little spectral snuggling, nothing to worry about.
Yeah. It's just a bit of cross-dimension friction.
It's a Barry White album, I think. All right, folks. Well, that has been our second volume of Haunted Hotel Stories. I think the first volume was back in 2018 or something like that. So we will be returning to this before another 5 years or 6 years is up, because I love hotel stories, and they are a never-ending font of high strangeness.
Yes. See if we can find a dancing ghost in the next collection.
I think you got one in your most recent episode.
Yes, exactly.
Was it the
brilliant? Never heard of a tap dancing
Was that the
ghost.
Black Wolf Inn?
I think so. Yeah, there was several there.
Yeah, it sounded like quite the place.
Yeah, there's one who doesn't like Christmas trees. Tap dancing ghost.
So make sure to check out that episode of Mysteries and Monsters. What's the number, Paul?
That would be 283.
Sounds right. You make them. I put them together, but I still cannot remember. Between the two of us, you'd think we'd be able to pull this off.
That was episode 283.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123, or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you, and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. The Ghost Story Guys are Luke Greensmith, who helped find the stories for this show and is also the host of the Luke Lore podcast. And he is now back. Luke has made his triumphant return after 4 months off with various illnesses, including a pretty goddamn terrible spider bite. And it has informed his latest episode, A Little Spider Therapy. Adam Lynch edits our video for us. He is also a co-host of the Weekly Creep podcast. Joseph Camo helps manage our YouTube account. He is the creator of the Sociology Professor YouTube channel. Tanya Downing assists with editing and manages our Facebook communities. She is also co-host of the Streaming into Madness podcast with Walter Whitaker. Sarah Kent, who manages our Reddit community.
And on in this episode, our paranormal concierge is Mr. Brennan Storr.
And of course, my co-host is the one, the only, the inimitable Paul Bestel, the paranormal Johnny Carson himself, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up on M&M?
Telephone calls from the dead.
Nice.
I have Dr. Callum Cooper, parapsychologist, who has reissued his book based on the work of D. Scott Rogo and Raymond Bayliss in their infamous 1979 book about people that were getting telephone calls from the dead, and looks into that phenomenon. And so we have a discussion about how the paranormal can be affected through bereavement and grief and loss, including talking about a couple of cases in the book. Obviously, Carl is a doctor in psychology as well as parapsychology, and so he deals a lot with bereavement and grief as well as the paranormal, and it's quite an interesting and thought-provoking conversation.
Oh, I'm very much looking forward to that. Where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media platforms, as well as all good podcast providers.
I am Largely the Truth on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. And you can find my horror movie show, Weird Together, available everywhere fine podcasts live. And of course, that is co-hosted with Joseph Camo, the sociology professor. As we said at the top of the show, we could not do what we do without our patrons and Apple Podcast subscribers. Each and every one of you, no matter what level you contribute at, you are a huge, huge part of our success, and we thank you for it. Patrons and Apple Podcast subscribers get access to bonus episodes, exclusive conversations between me and Paul. There's shows like Host Adventures, which is a bi-weekly trip through whatever's going on in my life. There are exclusive live streams, and best of all, it's all ad-free, because ads suck. You can get that at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or sign up to GST Premium via Apple Podcasts. Paul, my friend, do you have any other spots coming up?
Not at the moment, no. I know we will be appearing with our good friend Brian again as we dive into another one of our favourite films in the next few weeks. But other than that, I'm rather glad. I'm already booked up to the end of May now, so I can't be asked.
Fair. Well, I was a guest recently on Streaming Into Madness. I reviewed the film Frogman with Tanya. We had a ton of fun. And then I was also a guest on Paratalk with Reeves Cook. Reeves had me on to talk about, Reeves is great. And we talked about all manner of weird shit. And I think he said to me originally, I want the episode to be about 35, 40 minutes. And I think it's like an hour and 15. So
good luck with that.
Yeah. Business as usual. You'll find all of those guest appearances, all the guest appearances Paul has done. Really, anyone who's on the team, if they're on another show, you'll find it linked in the blog at ghoststoryguys.com. Also at ghoststoryguys.com, if you want to pick up some Ghost Story Guys merch, that's the place to start looking. We have t-shirts, stickers, mugs, all kinds of cool stuff. And you will eventually get a thank you video from both of us. I keep forgetting to do that, but you will get one, I promise. Shout out to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is a project of film journalist and composer Harper Smith. You can find more of Harper's work by searching for Rainy Days for Ghosts or Street Witch on streaming platforms everywhere. Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursoff of Pizzanta Music. Find more from him by searching for Pizzanta Music wherever you get your tunes. And I guess that's going to do it.
Well, we'll be back in a week, but until then...
Into the darkness we go, you son of a bitch.
Suck me, fool.
You folks will have to listen to the outtakes for that to make sense. But yes, into the darkness we go.
Practicing for if he gets chased by the police at night.
In this city, it is very possible. In my gym, it is very possible. I mean, usually those guys, they work out at nighttime, but again, can't rule it out.
We'll be back in a
Nope,
week.
you did it again.
But until then,
You're way too close.
we'll be back in
All
a
right,
week.
you son of a bitch. I have to edit all this.
We'll be back.